Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Manjiri Nadkarni back here for another Wellness Wednesday. Today, we're going to talk about combating childhood anxiety, and I am live on the Blue Water Nutrition page, my Facebook group, as well as my YouTube page. I'm also live for the first time after a long time on Instagram. So today we're going to talk about combating childhood anxiety. There's some spelling error right here, but that's fine. So yeah, if you're watching this live, please say a quick hi. If you're watching this as a replay, you can always post your questions or put a hashtag as replay so I know that you are watching this. And if you have any questions at any point of time, I'll be more than happy to answer those questions, right? So I'm just going to hop on for a little bit till I see more people join me live. I can see Anubhuti is here, Samir is here, Kalpamrut Ayurved is here as well. So yeah, let's talk about combating childhood anxiety. So anxiety is getting way more common in kids. So in the like it's more diagnosed is what I'm saying. It's not that um, children could be having way more anxiety today than they were a few years ago because of the nature of just our general life and how it's changed and the constant demands that are put on them. But at the same time, because there is a lot more awareness about mental health, there are more chances of your kids getting diagnosed with anxiety related issues. And also because our food has been degrading for a long time, I always bring it back to the food, or the food is essentially what you put in your being. In Ayurveda we talk a lot about the concept of ahar, which is everything you're consuming, right? Need not just be the physical food that you're consuming, but it could definitely be everything you're taking in through your senses. If you're watching something that's violent, or if you're watching something that's stimulating, if you're playing video games too much, right, that can also create a lot of impressions in your mind and create a lot of anxiety. So that's what we're going to talk about. So sometimes anxiety in children can manifest in different ways. Separation anxiety is common for maybe toddlers and pre-toddlers when going to school. They just don't want to, not toddlers, like preschoolers when they are going to school, right? And what happens is, anxiety sometimes pops up just before your exam, which is also like nervousness is common, right? Before an exam, but a full blown anxiety attack or back to school anxiety that everybody's facing right now, not just kids, right, but also the parents. But there's a lot of pressure on the kids as well to make sure they're sanitizing all the time. And some of these kids are young enough that they don't really understand the impact, right? So it can also manifest as tantrums or meltdowns or agitation, crying, any kind of defiant behaviors where they're not listening to you. These could also be symptoms of anxiety. And then there could also be physical issues like recurrent stomach aches. Recurrent stomach aches, where the kid just complains of a stomach ache, but there is no other cause, right? Or even lack of sleep, that they're afraid to go to bed, they're afraid to go to sleep. So that could be another issue. Overactivity is something I'm also going to address, because you're constantly putting that pressure on yourself. You're jumping from one thing to the other, and you have no breathing space in between, you have no leeway in between. So that is also one of the causes nowadays. We leave um, we are living in a place where, or we're living in an era where we're completely governed by clocks. We're just jumping from one place to the other, just running after things, and that could 100% create anxiety, not just in adults and kids. And kids are super busy these days too. They have their classes, like their schools, and then there are some extra trainings or their hockey or whatever extracurricular activities they do, and sometimes they don't have any breathing space in between that, right? So that can also lead to anxiety. Sometimes there's a lot of school related anxiety where you have to get really good marks, so that itself causes a lot of pressure, and that can create anxiety as well. Going to talk about a few things, today, that serve as triggers for this anxiety. I'm also going to talk about some strategies you can start implementing right away for your children to get rid of anxiety or ease anxiety. And then we talk about some herbs and supplements that can help, with anxiety in children. So one of the most common things that I see is caffeine, right? And no child is going to drink a cup of coffee technically, when we talk about coffees or caffeine, no child is really going to drink cups of coffee, but there are so many different foods, that could have caffeine in it, right? And even something as simple as certain kind of bars, energy bars, or even some kind of Cliff bars would have caffeine in it, right? Some orange soda or Mountain Dew have 41 grams of caffeine in it, right? So there are this caffeine that can be a huge trigger for anxiety. And while your child might not directly drink caffeine, there could be a lot of caffeine in the foods they're having. So beware of the protein bars, beware of snack bars, beware of different sodas which could have caffeine, or energy drinks that could have caffeine, certain kinds of ice creams, certain kinds of candy bars, even hot chocolate, Starbucks hot chocolate, if you're just giving them a hot chocolate, has 20 grams of caffeine, right? Milligrams of caffeine, sorry. So even hot chocolate with Nesquik, they say it's chocolate. The chocolate powders are caffeine free, but most chocolate beverages might also have caffeine. So that is where you're going to look for this caffeine. Any vitamin waters, any energy drinks are also going to have coffee or caffeine, right? So make sure you're avoiding these products. Make sure you're avoiding coffee or caffeine. Coffee is not directly had in kids, but caffeine is found and sneaked in a lot of foods, like even energy bars. So that's the first thing I would ask to avoid. The second thing is excess of sugar or refined sugar. Refined sugars, if you see your child bouncing after a candy, or after a juice box, or after having even a fruit juice, or some like donuts, they might be reactive to sugar. Food triggers or sensitivities to sugar are extremely common, and even a simple juice might have about lots of sugar, like almost like 10 spoons of sugar can be there in one juice, right? So make sure you are avoiding excess sugar. Make sure you're avoiding, we talked about caffeine, we talked about sugar, so that is something that has to be avoided. Food coloring is the other one, right? So food coloring, certain kinds of dyes also impact a lot of behavior, and they can also trigger anxiety. Food additives as well, not just food dyes, but any kind of additives. They could also be preservatives. They can also create a lot of anxiety or trigger a lot of anxiety, so that has to be avoided. Aspartame is a very common sweetener that is used nowadays. A lot of gum has aspartame, and aspartame can also contribute to anxiety and behavioral problems in children. And there was a study done in 1994 that also shows that aspartame triggered anxiety in kids, and it can also show up in a lot of different places. So sometimes your child is actually chewing gum for that calming sensory input, but if your child is ingesting aspartame at the same time, it's going to be counterproductive, right? So you have to make sure. And there are gums that contain xylitol. So sweet things can easily be, I'm going to look at a few questions, how to bring contentment in kids too. He's always anxious about getting new toys but never content. So that has to be taught, like contentment is, you have to learn him to be a little bit more appreciative. One thing you can do is start just saying your gratitude every night before bedtime, right? When you start being grateful for what you have, that's when you start being more content. So at night time, before your kid goes to bed, one nice thing would be just to say three things he or she is grateful for, right? So that would be a fantastic way. A nice and easy way to replace sugary things is maybe switch it up with fruit, right? So instead of giving them treats in the forms of cakes, cupcakes, or candies, maybe have some fruit. And you can also use grapes or melons, which have a little bit more high sugar, right? So at least you're giving them, if they're so used to this sugar fix that they're throwing tantrums, you're giving them something that has good nutrients and which does not have empty calories, right? So this is extremely important. So if he loves sugary foods, you have to avoid, but you can start replacing it with sugar. right? And gradually cut it out of the diet. You don't go cold turkey on kids because it just doesn't work out as well, right? So sugary things we talked about preservatives. Aspartame is the other thing. Food coloring is the other thing, right? So food sensitivities, even to dairy or gluten, if your child is reacting, it can also trigger anxiety, right? Any food sensitivities or food allergies have the potential of triggering anxiety in your children. So make sure you can keep a dietary log of what they're eating, and you can see if they ate a certain thing and the symptoms have worsened, or they just start bouncing or jumping or displaying any kind of defiant or destructive behaviors, right? So that will give you a better idea as to what's happening or what kind of food they are reacting to. I'm quickly going to look at a few questions on my Instagram as well. So main problem is the advancing technology overpowering us, and yeah, 100%. So that we're exposed to too much technology. Blue light can also create a lot of sleep issues in kids. So if your child is playing games at night or watching something on iPad, and COVID has been extremely terrible for everybody's habits, right? So if you're into late night movies, or if your child or a teenager is into watching movies or sleeping really late at night, sometimes what that happens is the exposure to blue light can also impact sleep, and because they're not sleeping, they can also start getting a lot more anxious, right? So in Ayurveda we talk about this vata dosh. So vata dosh is the energy of the wind, right? So not sleeping on time, not eating on time contributes to aggravation of this vata dosh, and this vata dosh governs your entire neurology. So it could make you anxious as well, right? It could lead to a lot of nutrient depletions. And usually when you have excess vata, you don't have enough nutrients in the body. So that's the one thing. But definitely it could lead to overstimulation of your nervous system, and you could also start getting a lot more anxious, right? So Atulya is asking me, should we drink coffee if there is night shift? Ideally, if you can stay without a coffee at night, that is a better option. For adults, we're discussing, not really kids, but you can always add something that grounds you. So if you really want to have your coffee, you can add maybe some butter or some ghee, or even like a thick, clean organic cream would do, right? So that balances the hyperstimulation of coffee in some people. So that's something you can definitely do. Okay, so moving a little bit forward. So there are some foods that can really help, right? So fat is extremely essential. Your brain is pretty much almost entirely fat. So good fats are essential in your diets, and not just through nuts and seeds, but even having fish. Something as introducing certain fatty fish to your kids could be a really good, healthy habit for them. So instead of giving them chicken nuggets every time, you could give them fatty fish. You can make nuggets out of it, or you can make salmon burgers out of it if they love burgers. So that's another option. But really good quality fats are essential. Ghee or clarified butter, right? So saturated fat also helps with brain. Saturated fat also helps with the structural integrity of your eyes and also all your cells. So adding a spoonful of ghee or clarified butter into their oatmeal or into their soups or into any stir fries that you make can definitely help your child also with focus and concentration, and also help balance excess anxiety. So that's something you can definitely do. Diet wise, making sure they're cutting down on refined foods, that is also important. Anxiety can also be triggered by a high sugar diet where you're constantly eating excess sugar, and then you're crashing. And that crash is the point where you start feeling uncomfortable, anxious, and even start losing focus, right? So, a simple idea would be adding some protein at each meal. Eggs are a great food in kids because they also have choline, which helps with your brain development. So, that is a really nice thing to have. So if you go to school and if you have busy days, maybe starting your breakfast with some eggs would be a nicer way than having just maybe a bun or something that's made with wheat or made with refined flours, right? So instead of a bagel, try to have some eggs before you go to school, so you will stay stable and focused, and your concentration would be really good. Now, some lifestyle strategies is, cutting down on the excess busyness, right? So we're all excessively busy. We're all constantly running from one place to the other with hardly any time for ourselves. And for certain kids, like, it's even worse, right? So right now, because of COVID and schools opening, activities are not full-fledged yet, but that has been the case, previously. So make sure your child has some downtime, right? And in that downtime, you can help them, create some art or do something with their hands that is also very grounding. Simple things like pottery or playing with clay or playing with dough, right, can also help calm kids down. Another thing that works well is weighted blankets. So if your child has trouble sleeping at bedtime, even weighted blankets are a great way to help ground them, right? And when we talk about this excess vata stimulation, weight is kind of going to ground this excess anxiety and going to give them a good rest, right? Taking a bath before bedtime, adding some essential oils, you can add lavender, right? And even an Epsom salt bath, which has lots of magnesium, is going to help your child sleep better and help overcome anxiety. If you use it for a consistent time, definitely it's going to help, right? Just gonna say a quick hi to Vibrant Ayurveda, right, on Instagram. And yeah, if you have more questions, make sure you post those questions here. So someone says my son is on the go whole day. Yeah, so you have to make sure, because it's a habit, right? We have to be rather than keep doing things, and that's the one thing I always stress. And I am a busy person. I have a tendency to get caught up with multiple activities and constantly go, go, go. So that's when I take a step back and really focus on myself and, okay, I have to just be this time, right? So that's what we need to teach kids, teaching them simple things like gratitude or just sitting down, closing their eyes. You don't have to teach them full fledged meditation if they're not ready. But one simple resource is taking one hand, putting it on your chest, taking the other palm, putting it on your belly, and just breathing very deeply. So just breathe in through the nose and breathe out through your mouth. Right? So this hand on your chest is like very comforting, especially if you're getting palpitations or something. So it really calms you down. And the hand on the belly, make sure you're breathing deeply into the belly. So that's really going to help your kids. And this is something that doesn't need any other tools. Your child can do this simple breathing exercise anytime at any point of the day, right? So this is something. And even before bedtime, playing some nice calming music is another, really good tip to do, so they can go to sleep in a nice way. Now, there are certain supplements and herbs that work really well, and also there are certain herbs and supplements that are safer in kids. I'm going to talk about a few Ayurvedic herbs. I always advise that please work with a practitioner or a doctor, because the dosaging would depend on um, your different body weight, and we have to really look at the child and what other symptoms are there, what kind of prakriti is there. So um, don't just pick up herbs off the chart and just start with the herbs. But there are some herbs that have a lot of value when it comes to anxiety. One thing is Ayurvedic herbs like ashwagandha or holy basil or even brahmi or bacopa can help with anxiety, and there are lots of studies done on these as well. So even like adding ashwagandha powder to milk or even a pinch of nutmeg to milk at bedtime can help give a good sleep and help calm down if your child is not reacting to milk in the first place. Magnesium is an anti-stress mineral, right? So if your child is going through any growing pains or any cramping and complaints of body aches, probably they're deficient in magnesium. Another sign you're deficient in magnesium is twitching. So if your kid complains of twitching of any muscles or calf cramps or twitching of eyes, he or she could be deficient in magnesium. So taking some magnesium works amazing. And there are magnesium powders. You can put it in warm water and they have delicious flavors too. So absolutely there's no way why your kid cannot palate it, so they are pretty good. The same with fish oils. Fish oils today come in really good flavors, right? And fish oils are also you can talk about them as omega 3. So, omega 3 fatty acids are essential for your brain, but omega 3 fatty acids have also been studied to help with anxiety, right? And blue water nutrition, we have quite different flavors that are also palatable by kids. They don't taste like fish, they don't smell like fish. So, please, you're most welcome to visit us and try those. B vitamins help with cognitive function. A good B complex, a multivitamin can also help to support your child, especially because our diets are deficient. And if you have a picky eater on your hands, right, your child might not be getting all the nutrition. So an idea could be to supplement with what they're lacking, but make sure you keep track of their diet and try to introduce as many new foods as you can to them. Certain essential oils, whether it's lavender or um, even internally lavender can work in some kids. Chamomile tea, right? And certain herbs you can use as tea. So chamomile tea is exceptionally great, as well as is holy basil tea. So you can literally add a little bit of honey or even some maple syrup. I don't recommend adding honey to hot tea, but maple syrup definitely you can add a little bit with chamomile, and that can also help calm down your child, right? So these are a few things I wanted to discuss about combating, children's anxiety. Um, so if you have any more questions, please let me know. If you have any more comments, let me know that as well. Usually the Wednesday videos are pretty short. I try to keep it 15 to 20 minutes. So I try to cover all the content in that, but make sure, talking to your kids, really helping them understand, in the COVID situation, because everybody's kind of clueless how to deal with it. Nobody has an idea, and it's also harder on the kids, right? And it's easier to distract with video games or watching TV than to feel what you're feeling. Right. But the feelings and emotions never go away. So if you're nervous, if you're anxious, you can distract by playing games or not paying attention, but the emotion is there. So I would highly recommend, having this open discussion with your children, trying to understand, where the anxiety is coming from, and also helping them express emotions. That is something that works long term. Thank you everyone for watching. This is kind of the end of my talk for today. And if you have questions, please let me know. Thank you for watching. I can't see your names because I'm in StreamYard and I cannot see anybody's name, who's in the group. But thank you for watching. I will be back tomorrow for 100 Days of Ayurveda from my page. And if you have any more questions, if you have any more suggestions on what kind of videos you want me to do, or what topics you would like me to talk about, I can do videos on them as well. So thank you once again. Have a fantastic day. Bye for now.